There is something to be said about judges that have followed the rule of law, have just some general background of life experiences, and have that compassion. And I think that's something that I bring to the table, and I would love to, as a public servant, bring that to our community.
Welcome to Henderson HQ. This is the podcast where you get all the stories behind the businesses that make our community tick. Don't forget to subscribe to our weekly newsletter. Hey, Henderson HQ, it's Scott Groves here. Met my new friend Lance at the Crab Shack when we were doing a Henderson Chamber of Commerce mixer, watching UNLV win their bowl game. So that was pretty cool. And Lance is running for a judge here, Justice Court Department 3 in Henderson. He's like, hey, can I come on and just talk about why people should care about voting for their judge? And I'm like, yes, I need to know why people should care about voting for their judge. If you want to find out more information, go to Lance, the number 4, the word judge.com. So Lance4Judge, the number 4.com. And we'll talk all about it. So maybe we'll start there. Like, why should people care about who they vote for judge? Because, there's a lot of partisan people that just go down blue no matter who, red no matter who. And then you get to judges and you're like, well, these aren't partisan positions. I don't know any of these people personally. Who am I going to vote for, right? So why does it matter who you vote for in a judgeship? Is that what we call it?
Yes, that's absolutely. And first and foremost, Scott, thanks for having me on. It's really a cool thing you've got set up, and I'm grateful that way I can communicate with our fellow community members out here in Henderson. So absolutely, what you're explaining is absolutely right. You go to the ballot, you're voting, and then ultimately you get that ballot fatigue. And for a lot of the partisan positions, you see a lot of information about them, but then when it comes to the judges, you tend to see not a whole lot. So I think it's important that the individuals get out there and establish themselves with the community. With regards to the judge position itself for justice court and for judges just across the board, the voters should recognize, really, that's kind of the most important step, because that may be kind of life-altering decisions that people may get somehow involved with the judicial system. For justice court, for instance, we handle all types of civil matters under a certain jurisdictional monetary threshold. And then also we handle criminal matters as well, and evictions. And these can be, again, like life-altering issues for people that are dealing out here in the community.
Yeah, it's crazy because obviously it's in vogue to complain about whoever the president is. 90% of the YouTube content is Biden this or Trump that or whatever. But when I talk to people, I'm like, can you name your mayor? Like, if you can't name your mayor or your local congressman, those are the people that actually affect our day-to-day life. I fall into this trap too. I love to talk about, global politics and giant socioeconomic problems. But what really affects me is I don't know, Boulder Highway construction going to be done one day at some point, right? So it's like, these are the things that matter. And I try to do my best to research at a deeper level the local issues, the local propositions, the local people for city council and board positions and whatnot. But you're right. I've never thought of that term before, but ballot fatigue has got to be like a real thing, right? By the time you get to the bottom of the ballot, it's like, oh, I don't care. They're not partisan. I'll go with this person's last name, which, by the way, having the last name which rhymes with Henderson or is close to Henderson, I think that's going to help you. So I think you're going to win. But why? Maybe you can talk a little bit about why people have ballot fatigue and why people don't connect to understanding that their local representatives are the ones that are going to affect their life the most.
I think it's a couple of things. Probably, first is we all have limited time, right? In other words, we have busy schedules. We have our daily jobs, our families to take care of. And so when you're going to the booth to vote, there may be so many names out there. You only have so much of a limited time available to actually do the research. And so I understand that even, for myself running, I see names out there and I have to double check and figure out, okay, I've never heard of this person. So I need to do a little bit of my own homework and figuring out what's going on. And then that kind of goes to the next step as far as how much is that individual that's on the ballot being out there active with the community? Are they going out there face to face? Are there signs out there? Are they engaged on social media and the internet where you can actually look and kind of do your own research and figuring out, what is this individual all about? And so I think collectively, I get it. I understand. But it's one of those things where, it is important because these are going to be individuals that could potentially somehow impact your life, whether directly or indirectly.
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about the why. Like, if somebody's thinking about like, okay, well, how do I do that, right? Because you don't have like a voting record I can look up, right? Or it's a big talking point now of like, oh, they're appointing all these advocate judges, and they're trying to make policy instead of interpret the laws that are already in the book. So, like, how would somebody even go about that? Like, if you didn't happen to come on this podcast, how would I find out what Lance believes, and is he tough on crime or soft on crime, or like, how would somebody even go about doing that research?
Well, maybe a couple things that could be done is, again, just doing kind of just a general overview search of the individual. How long have they been a member of our community? I've been out here in Southern Nevada for 35 years. I went to public elementary school, middle school, high school. I graduated from Silverado out here in 1999. So I think at least there's a lot of background from already some of our local citizens who I grew up with that helps out. Additionally, if you go on the internet, you may get an overview of the individual, right? In other words, if they're running for judge, most likely than not, there's a couple of jurisdictions in Nevada where you actually don't even need to be an attorney to run for justice of the peace for justice court.
Wait, were you an attorney?
I am an attorney.
Okay.
Been it
So
for
you can be a judge without having been an attorney?
correct. There's certain areas, for instance, like Laughlin, I believe Searchlight, Good Springs. The jurisdiction there, the population is small enough to where you don't actually need to be a licensed attorney to be a justice of the peace out there in some of these areas.
That blows my mind because, like, procedurally, other than having to go to court because I got a traffic ticket that I forgot about, and so they issued a bench warrant for me. Funny story, by the way. Okay, I got to tell a funny story. I get pulled over on the way to Long Beach one time, going to see my girlfriend, and the cop comes up, "Hey, you were speeding, yada yada, license and whatever," and comes back with his gun drawn. And he's like out of the car, handcuffs. So I'm sitting on like the side of the 710 freeway, and he goes back to his car and he comes back laughing. He's like, "I'm so sorry." He's like, "You had a bench warrant out for your arrest, and I didn't recognize the code for which you had a bench warrant, and I had to like call it in or look it up on the computer or whatever. You have a jaywalking ticket from like 5 years ago in the city of Long Beach that either you didn't get the ticket or you didn't pay the $87. You have like a warrant out for your arrest. I'm supposed to arrest you, impound your car, take you to jail." He's like, "You're a moron." I'm like, "Yes, sir. I'm a moron. I'm so sorry." I thought it was like a mistaken identity or something because like I wasn't driving drunk. I wasn't like, I didn't
Right.
have any criminal charges. He's like, "You need to get to the Long Beach court and take care of this immediately. Because if it wasn't me, you'd be spending the night in jail." So I go to the court, the judge, and like I'm sitting there, right? And they have like all the docket numbers, and I'm sure I was like last priority. So I'm sitting through these cases where like somebody got in a bar fight and then tried to gouge the guy's eyes out so he couldn't identify him. Like, dude driving around on his bike with an ice chest with like 4 pounds of cocaine in it. And then I come up there and the judge looks at it, he's like, "Jaywalking? Are you shitting me? You're wasting my time with this." He's like, "Pay your fee, get out of my court, don't ever come back again." So it was just funny. Anyway, I wouldn't know procedurally how to go through like a legal case. So that blows my mind that there's certain areas where you don't have to be a lawyer. What type of law have you studied, practiced? Because I know it's so diverse on what you can do as a lawyer.
So for roughly the 18 years that I've been practicing, my primary focus has been criminal defense. I handle both state cases and federal cases. Anything from like you talk about if there's a jaywalking issue, all the way up to the higher ends. The type of crimes where people are being alleged to have commit violent felonies, murders, and I'm proud of being part of this process. It's looking out. It's all part of the process where our country, we're blessed to have that opportunity where we have the due process. People have their opportunity to be heard, and they're making sure that people's individual constitutional civil liberty rights are protected, and that we abide by, the presumption of innocence, which was, again, one of the things that's just really a beautiful thing about our country that I'm really grateful for. And I take that extremely serious. It's an oath that I've taken. I'm zealous and ethical about the whole process. And again, it's just something where we just as the community need to be grateful, and we also need to recognize from the standpoint of attorneys that do practice criminal defense of whites, such an important piece of the puzzle, if you will,
Yeah.
for our civil liberties.
Yeah, I feel like defense lawyers get like a bad rap until you know somebody that's needed to be defended by a defense attorney. Then all of a sudden, it's a blessing.
It's interesting from that standpoint, and I've had some interesting cases where there's been no doubt. I mean, it's been publicized that I've represented individuals who were actually innocent and accused of serious crimes, as far as, for instance, acting as undercover vice law enforcement, where ultimately was determined that based upon a faulty six pack, in other words, like a photo lineup, that they had the wrong individual, and that individual had very similar physical characteristics as far as the actual perpetrator. So, somebody's looking at spending the rest of their life in prison. This is the check and balance that we have, and completely recognizing from the standpoint of, hey, I've got a wife, I've got kids. I want to have, strong law enforcement laws that protect myself and my family from crimes. So it's just one of those balance of the scales, if you will. But it's so important for people to have that due process.
Yeah. So why would somebody want to go from the defense attorney side to even run as a judge? I cannot imagine it's a pay raise. So there must be some other motivation for you. Like, why does somebody decide that they want to go on the other side of, what do they call it? The other side of the table, the other side of the bench?
Well, I would consider it maybe the middle side, if you will, right? So I think the judge is calling the balls and strikes. And then you have your prosecutors, and you have the defense attorneys that are involved with it from the criminal standpoint. The reason why I decided to run was ultimately I just believe that I'm very active community engagement wise. That's something that I find extremely important. I also really have a strong stance with access to justice. I enjoy seeing individuals being able to overcome adversary in their lives, and also trying to find ways to, when people are in difficult situations, to get over that hurdle. I think it's a community effort. And I certainly love what I do being a criminal defense attorney, and representing those that have been accused and making sure that they have the proper due process. But also from being a judge, I do believe I can bring that being impartial, and also recognizing as well, there is something to be said about judges that have followed the rule of law, have just some general background of life experiences, and have that compassion. And I think that's something that I bring to the table, and I would love to, as a public servant, bring that to our community. Again, I've been out here with my family in Southern Nevada since I was 8 years old, and I've been blessed with very, very humble beginnings. When we moved out here, my parents and they had gotten job opportunities. We came from the Midwest. They got job opportunities at the Mirage, and we started living in an apartment from the jump, and gradually we're able to be blessed and humble to, grow ourselves, grow our family. And I was, blessed to get the education and things to give me where I'm at today. That I just feel that there's something inside of me that being able to further help our community is something I'm passionate about, and would take, again, that humble pride of wanting to just make our community an ongoing greater place.
So you mentioned something there kind of about interpreting the laws, or however you phrase it, probably better than I can. Can you talk a little bit, when you're a judge, right? And there's obviously the letter of the law. There are certain criminal penalties or financial penalties. Can you talk a little bit of like, this is the letter of the law, this is the spirit of the law, this is the interpretation of the law? Because, people are familiar with the very high profile cases where it's like, whoa, he could be facing anywhere from 5 years to life in prison. It's like, well, that's a pretty big spread, right? I'm a little older now. I'm losing some of my hair, but let's say I make it till 80, 5 years. Okay, I get out at 50, and like maybe I can still make a life for myself. The rest of my life dying in prison, that's as life altering as it can get. So can you just talk a little bit about that? Like, on the judge side or maybe even on the lawyer side, how you start to think about that like letter of the law versus interpretation of the law versus variability in sentencing? Because it seems like judges are given a lot of room to interpret stuff.
No, and that's a great question too, and I think it's something that allowing the community to have a better grasp of. So, for instance, our legislature, our state legislature creates, when we're at a case that involves state criminal allegations, for instance, they define, they show what the criminal laws are, for instance, and also as far as what potential punishments come into play. Based upon that, that's obviously decisions that are made when whether it's the district attorney's office or the city attorney's office elects to charge somebody with the offenses they may have been arrested for. And at that point in time, that's where the individuals that are representing the attorneys representing individuals accused of those crimes come before the court, and then the court will have certain discretions that need to be taken into consideration. For instance, when like setting bail, or if ultimately the person is convicted of the crime, what the potential punishment is. Now, with regards to like when you highlight the more serious cases, and those are the ones that typically get like, press coverage, for instance, the judges are within the confines of what the sentencing structure would allow. Some offenses are non-probationable, and so that individual, if they're convicted or they plead guilty, they'll be going to prison, and it's just a matter of, for instance, how long. But when we take kind of a step back and we look at it, not from the standpoint of maybe the crimes that have that media sensation, but more so on kind of what you would say is like the petty offenses,
Right.
issues of dealing with like possession of drugs or petty larceny. Those kind of cases, I think, require, a judge really to look at it from the standpoint of discretion where, hey, is this somebody's first offense, their first rodeo in the criminal justice system? And are there alternatives that may exist because that person's dealing with some struggles and hurdles in their life? For instance, financially, drug addiction, mental health issues. When we look at it from our veterans dealing with PTSD, and I think a judge then should look at it from the standpoint of, can we try to get them on a track that would allow them the opportunity to kind of show themselves that, what, that's not a reflection of who I am as an individual. And are there alternatives? Specialty courts, for instance, dealing with like substance abuse in our drug courts, or our veterans dealing with PTSD issues, going into a veterans court, or mental health issues, which has become obviously a big, epidemic nationwide and in our state included. How do we try to address that? Because if we simply just put them in jail, for instance, is that going to help out our community? Have we addressed the underlying issue? And those are things I think where judges do have discretion and need to take into consideration that our legislature has allowed by allowing these courts to be created, giving the judges those opportunities to take a look at.
Yeah. And maybe not so much about you personally or the Department 3 that you would be serving, but I'd love to just hear kind of globally, like give me some education. One of the reasons we moved out of LA 5 years ago and moved up to here, and we're so happy we did, is like LA and California in general had basically taken this stance of like, we're going to be a no bail state. We're going to not charge any criminal with basically anything unless there's blood involved. So it just got to this point where like, friends of mine, they'd be sitting out at a restaurant and they get whacked over the back of the head and their wallet or their watch stolen, right? Because it's like, well, it's under $1,000. It probably won't be even a chargeable offense, right? Or I'll just call it what it is, in my opinion, the looting of stores. And it's like, we're not talking about like Whole Foods for baby formula. We're talking about, Target for PlayStation 5s or whatever. And I was just looking around at the landscape and I was like, we need to move to a community where the police are empowered to actually investigate and arrest and stop crimes. So can you talk a little bit about like where kind of globally Henderson and then Vegas and then maybe the state is as far as their stance on crime or bail or, I think you know what I'm getting at here.
Yeah.
Like we're not becoming California, are we? Where like nobody's going to be charged with anything.
No, I don't believe that's the case. I believe we have a strong legislative system that keeps tabs on this. We have, a strong media outlet that focuses attention on these type of issues. So I think we are staying on top of it as a state as a whole. Again, there are issues that come into play where if an individual, such as you described, commits these serious kind of offenses, there is a hammer that can be dropped. And there was also, for instance, during the past special session that we just had, a crime bill that was enacted and makes these more tough on crimes, if you will, to making sure that the recidivism of the more high-end serious crimes are properly addressed. And I completely understand that. Look, you want to have a community. We're blessed in Southern Nevada with having, a strong economy, having, I think, still of what we feel almost like, even though our population has grown from when I moved out here. I don't even think in '89 we were anywhere near like the million. And now I think we're in around 2 million now. But you still talk with, your fellow neighbors, and there's always like that 6 degree of separation of like how you know somebody from somebody else.
Right.
And I think that's really what makes our area here in Southern Nevada so unique too, is that we do look out for each other with regards to that.
Hey, thanks for taking a break from the podcast real quick. We just want to talk about 2 companies that make this podcast happen. One, Scott Wright over at Wright Auto Body. So whether or not you've got a little ding in your car, you had a major accident and you need an insurance adjuster to come out and see what it's going to cost to fix your car, or you're remodeling a classic from the wheels up, Scott Wright over at Wright Bet Auto Body can take care of you. Also, big shout out to Ethereal Spa, a gym for your skin. They're helping us out make this podcast happen, make the Henderson HQ newsletter happen, and pretty much anything having to do with the health and fitness of your skin, whether that's for beautification with Botox and stuff like that, or whether it's just like taking care of pre-cancer spots and really treating your skin the way that it should, with as much as it gets beat up here in the sun of Las Vegas. Check them out for all things skin health and beauty. Thanks again to Scott Wright over at Wright Bet Auto Body and the team over at Ethereal Med Spa.
In addition, I also believe that when we have, concerns of, again, kind of things that you may touch upon, like with California, we as the community, I think, stay on top of those kind of issues. As a judge, it wouldn't be appropriate for me to say, this is how I'm going to stand, because every case presents different kind of optics. Every case does.
Right.
And again, that's why it's the importance of that whole due process. So the individual that's, accused has that opportunity to be heard and have a better understanding as far as kind of what their background is, if you will. Looking at it from even like the issues with mental health, substance abuse, dealing with our veterans. I think we try to do our very best here in the state of Nevada of making sure that we also are focusing collectively on looking out for our fellow community, neighbor, if you will.
Yeah, it makes sense that every case would present differently, because behind every defendant podium is a human, and they all have different stories, right? So like you having that discretion to be like, whatever, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but first time offense, like maybe there's a path into rehab, or like you said, PTSD. I have a lot of friends from my time in the military and kind of groups that I'm in where it's like, yeah, this is not, I'm going to use a name of somebody that I don't know in the military. This is not Chuck anymore. Like, you get blown up a few times and concussions, and you see some stuff that no human being should have to see. They might have a little bit different outlook on life and might respond to things a little bit differently. So I'm glad that there's other off ramps other than let's just put them in a cage and see what happens. And it's like, I don't know, does that really help anybody? I'm sure plenty of people need to be there, but there's, like you said, there's a different human behind every case, I'm sure.
Well, and even taking it from the other side, because look, if there's a crime committed, presumably somebody's been impacted by that on the other side.
Right.
You have your victims, and that's obviously a serious concern as well. We here, again, out here in the community, we have our family, we have our close friends, and if they are accosted, if they're victims of a crime, you want that justice, and you want to make sure that that stuff is not, ongoing recidivism out here where you never feel safe. So I do, again, think there has to be that protective outlet, if you will. And that's also why, making sure that law enforcement has that opportunity to, like you described, properly investigate the case, and making sure that they are getting bad guys off the street. They have a very, very intense job, high stressful law enforcement does. I recognize that. In addition to doing the being a criminal defense attorney, I participated in the Henderson Police Citizens Academy, 12 weeks long, and was in there and getting kind of a general overview of how Henderson Police operates. I think that's extremely important, and again, something that I bring forth to the table, running as a judge, having just a general overview. And look, the uniformed officers have body cams that are constantly active, which is a blessing from the standpoint of for them saying, hey, if this person that I arrested is accusing me of doing X, Y, and Z, well, you just hit play and making sure that that wasn't being done.
Right.
But, if we think about it, I mean, right now we're here on video, but just imagine, we walk out there and we're still, on video, if you will. That that's stressful in of itself. I do think it's an important check and balance, if you will, because officers obviously they have the ability to arrest somebody, take away somebody's liberty by putting them in jail is something serious in nature. So I understand it from that standpoint. But I think, look, at the end of the day, the vast majority of law enforcement, these officers are out there wanting to just protect and help out our community.
Yeah.
Again, sometimes you get like you'll hear of the one bad apple, if you will, and that unfortunately sometimes gets overly publicized, which
Yeah.
I get. But let's also take it and put it into context of how many good men and women, first responders, police, firefighters, EMT, all those individuals out there, and some of the stuff that they go through, their own trauma-wise, as far as what they have to observe and be involved with, which, you and I don't even have to worry about. So it's
I
just
could
that
not
check and
do
balance.
I could not do that job. Good friend of mine's a fireman, and the first time he saw, a family smeared across the 210 freeway, and he was the first responder to that call, it traumatized him for weeks, and he had to get some professional help because he's like, this is the part of the job, I'm thinking I'm going there to put out fires and like the movies and whatnot. And he's like, I just didn't realize how many car accidents we would be responding to with deaths. And he's like, the first time I saw a car seat where the child didn't make it, he's like, I was a wreck for, a long time. And I'm glad he got the help that he needed.
That's human nature, you know what I mean? So, I mean, and that's the one thing is we as citizens, just general community members, when, individuals out there doing their profession and wanting to do a great job at it as well, maybe we always take a step back and reflect for a minute and thinking, wow, this person is really out there trying to do it for the greater good and think about it from the standpoint of what they have to endure. It's just, the ability to process and be mindful of our fellow, brothers and sisters, our neighbors out there that are, again, trying to help out our community.
Yeah. I've got an ex-girlfriend actually who was on LAPD, and she's amazing. She since got promoted to detective, and I still keep in touch with her father because we became great friends, and same with her. But I remember when the body cams came out for LAPD, I was like, oh, how great for the criminals. Like if they get abused or whatever, like we now have video evidence of it. And in talking to her, she's like, no, this is the greatest thing that ever came along for cops because 99 out of 100 times we're doing the right thing, but we get a lot of false accusations. And now that it's on video, the criminal can't say, oh, they beat my head against the car as they were putting me in the back seat. They're like, no, it's all on video. Just push, like you said, just push play. And I imagine body cams have solved hundreds, if not thousands of problems per department where they might've been looking at a lawsuit or false allegations. And, if they did something wrong, great. They should be taken care of in whatever way is appropriate. But I think body cams have been a huge blessing to cops.
No, I think just across the board as well. And that's why, from my standpoint, just making sure because there are scenarios where body cams are not active. And I think the important thing would be that they continue to remain active. I know there's some issues that I have, like, for instance, some ongoing litigation with where officers will turn off their cameras when they go into the detention facilities. And, sometimes that can become problematic. And it's kind of like, well, why are they deactivated? And then also, for instance, non-uniformed officers don't have that requirement of having to have a body cam.
Yeah.
And so I think making sure that those body cams are active, making sure that when the case then proceeds from the arrest now over into the actual charging process and disseminated to the attorneys on both sides, that it helps out tremendously. So it's one of those things that I think, like you've described it, it clears up a lot of the he said, she said type of an ordeal immediately.
Right.
That'll help out for all sides, for everybody. So I'm in complete agreement with you on that.
You mentioned it a couple times, this term veterans court. Can you explain what that is? Because this is the first time I've heard about it.
Certainly. So there's a couple of veterans courts. There's some that are in our justice courts and some that are in our district courts. Henderson Justice Court right now does not have a specific veterans court available. That would be something that I'd be looking into. I know probably have to work through the grant process, if you will. But individuals that have served in our military have the option as a diversion, if you will, of going through Veterans Court, where it's a specialized court that focuses on issues of, hey, what may have been the trigger, if you will, for what caused the underlying offense that that individual committed. And they get various help, making sure that if there's, mental health issues, there's Veterans Affairs VA assistance that may be available to them that maybe they weren't taking advantage of, going through the proper therapy. If there's maybe a co-occurring with also substances, looking at how they can work on getting away from using those particular, drugs or whatever it is that they're using to cope with. And ultimately, if that individual successfully completes the Veterans Court, it also may be an avenue where, in certain circumstances, they can have that offense that was committed sealed, taken away from their record. Because again, if it's one of those things where these are isolated instances of where we kind of figure out, hey, this was because somebody who, God blessed, served our community, is dealing with some kind of trauma event, or sometimes it's difficult transitioning from being a veteran to now coming back into our community and going through just the day-to-day life, and trying to transition, doing just everyday normal work, if you will, allowing us to kind of find out and figure out what those issues are. And if they're able to address it, why would we want somebody who served our country, if there's, certain circumstances that allow that they should have that, offense held against them, if you will. So it's kind of that second chance opportunity, if you will. And it's something I think, again, that our veterans respectfully deserve for their commitment and sacrifice for our country.
Yeah, I can tell this story because my friend Clay Martin, former Marine sniper, former Special Forces in the Army, he told this story on the Jocko podcast, which is a little larger than ours. They get a few more downloads. He told this story, so I feel comfortable repeating it, even though the first time he told me it was just the two of us. And for people that might be like, oh, well, why are we going to be soft on crime on veterans? And, a crime's a crime, yada, yada, yada. I remember Clay explaining to me, he's like, for the first 10 years that I was out of the military, because he did some wild Special Forces stuff, he's like, I never did it, but every time I walked past a firearm, and he was doing a firearm training as a living when he got out of the military, he's like, yeah, just isn't it normal every time you walk by a firearm, you just think about putting it in your mouth and pulling the trigger? He's like, that was my default thought process for a decade until he got some medical help and whatnot. So luckily he didn't have any scrapes with the law, but you can imagine if that's your mindset post serving in Iraq and Afghanistan for a decade, that person's got a different thing going on
Wired
in their brain.
differently.
They're wired differently, and they're wired differently because what the government had them do. So it's like, I totally understand why, if he had ever gotten into some type of violent altercation or whatever, there might be some different mitigating circumstances
100.
for somebody that went through that. Cause when he told me that, I started crying. I'm like, are you okay now, man? And luckily, like I said, he's gotten some help, but I just can't imagine, I'm a firearm owner. I can't imagine every time I walk by a firearm being like, oh, I should just put that in my mouth and pull the trigger. But that was his default setting for a decade. And it was, it was brutal.
And I think for our community as well, when we see that, hopefully when, veterans see it's not an outlet for somebody to get away with something, if you will, it's that compassion aspect, and our community as a whole saying we're doing our best to recognize and appreciate the sacrifice and commitment that our veterans went through. We can't put ourselves in the shoes of those individuals, but we want to make sure that they understand, that our veterans understand that we have their back for
Yeah.
all the blessings we have. Again, even just the whole process we're talking about, that whole due process, without them, we're nothing. So it's just a huge blessing. And that's why it's extremely important to have these kind of specialty courts and services available that they wouldn't otherwise know, hey, as opposed to looking into that, your fellow brothers and sisters are out there wanting to make sure there are avenues there, you are being heard, and there are things available to try to work with you.
So we talked about it briefly right before we started recording. You're like, hey, one of the things that I would be doing is for the, higher level criminal cases and whatnot, you would be presiding over, I'm guessing it would be probable cause or something of that nature. Can you talk a little bit about, okay, somebody comes in for an offense, whatever it is, and you in the moment, probably because there's a certain amount of time that they legally have to be processed and or arrested and or tried or whatever, have to decide if there's probable cause for the case to continue, but that doesn't mean they're guilty, but it means there's enough of this. Can you talk a little bit about that as like, I get arrested for a crime, I come see you first, and then you're trying to determine, is there enough juice here for it to squeeze or whatnot? Can you talk a little bit about that probable cause process, or
Sure.
that's called, I might be calling it something wrong.
And maybe take 1 minute, I can just take a rewind
Yeah.
to kind of explain for running for Henderson Justice Court Department 3 types of matters that I would be hearing. So it's kind of a hybrid court from the standpoint of I would be hearing civil cases, in other words, non-criminal cases dealing with, think of it like the people's court.
Yeah.
So think of like
This person owes me $5,000. They ripped me off or whatever.
something like that. Yeah, absolutely. Kind of the minor contract disputes that exist, issues of, hey, this particular thing that this person sold to me doesn't work out, and they're having their civil disputes. So for that, it would be a jurisdictional standpoint from the civil cases. In other words, things that I could hear if it's under $15,000, and then also hearing small claims as well. It's hearing kind of a different set of civil cases as a Henderson Justice Court judge. Additionally, I would be hearing landlord-tenant issues, in other words, like the eviction process as well. Somebody's not timely on paying their rent, or if there's issues of, for instance, like habitability, is the place, have the air conditioning running, and if it's out during the summer months and nothing's going on, I would hear those kind of cases as well. And then going on to the criminal cases, the Henderson Justice Court hears for misdemeanor offenses, in other words, where the person is looking up to potentially 6 months in jail. Those would be decided by a bench trial. In other words, I would be deciding if the government had proved their case beyond a reasonable doubt and whether that individual is guilty or not. And then also there's what's called the preliminary hearing, probable cause hearings.
Preliminary hearing.
And those deal where the offenses exceed the 6 months in jail. So in other words, we have also what are called gross misdemeanor offenses, and those carry up to a year in jail. And then also our felony cases, which entail potential prison time. In other words, beyond a year going to prison. And in those preliminary hearings, me as the judge would hear whether the government has shown that there is slight or marginal evidence that has existed. It's not beyond a reasonable doubt. It's not determining guilty or not guilty. And if there is slight or marginal evidence shown, then that individual would be what's called bound up. In other words, they would be transferred to the district court, and our district courts here are located in downtown Las Vegas at the Regional Justice Center.
Yeah. So you're deciding, basically, have the police and the prosecution done enough research, have enough evidence to make this a real case that should be seen in front of a judge for a guilty, not guilty verdict, something like that.
Correct. And what would happen though so if it was like, for instance, the gross misdemeanor or felony offense, that would go to district court. In those cases, the individuals that are accused of that are entitled to a jury trial.
Okay.
So the interesting thing here in Nevada, we're one of the few states for misdemeanor offenses that we don't have jury trials except for when somebody is accused of a battery domestic violence. A lot of other states have 6 or 12 jurors, even for like traffic offenses, if you will.
Like a DUI or something, you could get a jury trial.
So
in other states.
In other states, correct. So for our DUIs out here, there are misdemeanor offenses up till a certain number that an individual has accumulated over a period of time that could make them felonies, or if there's somebody that's significantly injured or unfortunately, sadly passes away as a result of it, then those would become felony DUIs. But for all the vast majority of those misdemeanors, except for battery, domestic violences, the individual is going to have a judge that determines whether the person's guilty or not guilty.
And how long is the term? Like once you're elected, because we'll just assume you're going to be, once you're elected, is it like a forever position, or do you have to do this whole dog and pony show every 2 years, or what does it look like?
So for this particular justice of the peace, they customarily carry a 6-year term.
Oh, okay. So you don't have to go through this whole podcast circuit again in 2 years.
Well, look, I'd be grateful to continue to go through the podcast just to talk about our community and, how great things are and ways that they're improve it. Rest assured that one of the things I think that I also take great pride in is being actively involved in the community, and I'll continue to do so. I think it's an important part of just being a community citizen. I go help out a group of who I consider brothers and sisters going into the flood channels here in Southern Nevada, where people are living in those flood channels and trying to help get them assistance to get them out of there. I go and provide assistance with what's called the Just One Project. They hold these pop-up mobile markets. I go out there and help out by handing out food distributions to our fellow brothers and sisters here in the community. So I don't think it's one of those things where you'll see me if I'm, fortunate and humbled to be elected to the position of Henderson Justice Court, where I'm not going to continue to be actively involved with our community. I think it's an important process.
And when does the vote come up? Because I know, sadly, every 4 years there's a big turnout because it's a presidential election, and then you look at some of the numbers for like the primary or the midterms, and it's like anemic. It's so sad because I'm like, again, going back to my original thought, yeah, voting for the president is important. I think you should do it. But the elections that come around every 2 years for your local people, that's where you actually see change in your community. So when is actual voting day, or y'all probably do a mail-in ballot, but when do people start to vote, and like when does this all come to fruition in Henderson?
So for my department, Henderson Justice Court Department 3, you will see my name on the ballot in the primary in June. So it's important. And look, in the primary, I think sometimes people are like, well, if I'm nonpartisan, for instance, and when you start looking at the numbers, percentage-wise, I think a good amount of individuals aren't necessarily registered Republican or Democrats. They sometimes don't think about that June election, and in that primary, and they simply vote in the November general election for this upcoming year. But what they just need to recognize is that June date's just as important, even if you're not, having the ability to vote down, for a particular party line, because those individuals may not be listed since they're nonpartisan. Those judges are still going to be in there.
Yeah.
And ultimately that in that June election, it could the position for a particular judge department could be decided in the June election and not even make itself over to the November election. So it's extremely important just to remember, hey, don't forget about the June election coming up.
Yeah, please register to vote, and then go vote in the June primary. This stuff is like ultimately important. Learning a little bit more about you outside of law and outside of what you do professionally, what are you passionate about? Like, obviously you do a lot of community service. I can tell that's just who you are. But like, I won't hold it against you if you play pickleball, even though I think that's the worst sport ever created. What do you like to do personally?
One of my favorite things that I've found as far as being able to unwind from the day in and day out of the profession is I play chess. My father taught me in an extremely young age. I played a lot of it in grade school. Sadly, I started to get away from it, when I was in college, and then kind of my 20s and 30s. But over the last couple of years, I've just taken a real good grasp of wanting to play chess. There's a local chess club. I'm a really exciting guy, right? So there's the local chess club.
You also collect stamps.
Yeah, and coins and stuff like that. No, I just have that focus on chess, and I go try to do it every Saturday afternoon. There's a local group nearby the Henderson Vegas border where this grandmaster out there has created for our community to play, and I play against all sorts of ages of individuals, and these kids, man, are just kicking my butt, and it's a very humbling experience. Just get smoked, get your butt kicked by these kids that they're telling me about. Yeah, I've got third grade, or this kind of little thing coming up, and I'm like, man, it really puts myself in.
So what are you rated? Like, I know just enough about chess to evaluate where people are at.
So I don't have that official rating. It's been since I was in junior high, since I went that far. Again, I'm only doing it as like a weekly hobby de-stressor. But I play against some of these kids that are extremely formidable, that are rated, and they go to all these tournaments. I figure at some point where I'm able to kind of maybe swallow a little bit of this humbling defeat, that I might try a tournament and then try to find out where I'm rated at.
Where would you guess?
In the negative numbers.
I mean, if you know the openings and
brother,
you got to be somewhere 15, 16, 18.
No, that's on the higher end. Again, I'm respectful. I mean, there's probably going to be somebody on your podcast that watches it, and the next thing you know, they're going to send me a message and challenge me on like chess.com, and then kick my butt, and then put in the comment section, this guy can't play chess worth a lick. So I'm extremely humble with that. Sometimes, what is it? The broken clock's right every 2 times out of the day.
Right.
Sometimes I'll be fortunate and get that win. But it puts myself in place knowing, you know what? It's nice to have gotten that one. And
it's funny because I read this book a long time ago about like the 2 types of thinking, like think fast or think slow, and people kind of they just deviate to one side or the other. And nothing became more true than when I started playing chess on chess.com, because I know like one opening for white, one opening for black. I kind of know how the pieces interact. I got a couple lessons in training from a friend of mine who's brilliant, and like same thing as a hobby, playing once a month. He's somewhere in the 2200, 2300 range, and he's brilliant. It's really humbling to play him when he blindfolds himself and beats me blind. He actually beat 3 of us playing concurrently, 3 games blindfolded. So anyway, think fast, think slow. In like blitz, like under a minute, I can get up to about 12 or 1300 on a rating, but if it's like a 10-minute game, I fall off to like 800 or 900 points, because like I just lose track of like what I'm moving. So I'm like a 300 point deviation, which has got to be pretty hefty at that level, where I can't even like break 1,000 on like an hour game. But if we're just playing in a minute, I can like under mistake somebody who over mistakes, and like I have a fighting chance.
No, I get it.
But yeah, so my brain does not think slow and strategic. I'm just like, do it fast and I'll figure it out. So
if I could just give a plug to the Grandmaster Richard, who runs it over at Star Wizard Chess over on Eastern. If anyone is a fan of chess and wants an outlet, I know they're open on Saturdays and have kind of these informal tournaments where we play against each other. But he runs it throughout the week, and he's just an extreme great gentleman. And I think it's important. Just, for me, I just, when I learned it at such a young age, through my dad playing chess, how I think just great of a game it is to just, help an individual with processing, strategize. I'm just very grateful. So,
by the way, I'm going to need an introduction to Richard before you leave so we can have him on the podcast.
Absolutely.
We're definitely kind of biasing towards business owners on the podcast, but I want to talk to just great people in the community about what they're doing. And maybe I can like sneak a few free lessons over the table here if I have him in on the podcast and highlight his chess group.
Yeah, no, I think that would be awesome. And then also, when we talk about just some of my other hobbies with that community service, if you haven't already, because I did say that's one of the things that I really take, I just find great passion for, is shine a light. And that's where we go in the flood tunnels here in Southern Nevada. There's 600 miles of flood tunnels, and I think they approximate about 15 to 1,800 people that are displaced that live there.
Oh, wow.
And there's some great guys. One of my brothers, I call him my brother, is Rob Banghart. And when you hear his story, it's kind of a like life changing when you hear some of their stories and what they've been able to overcome in life. And then also them wanting so much to be able to connect to those dealing with those situations now. That also may make a good podcast for you too.
Second introduction I'm going to need before you leave.
Yes, sir.
So,
Absolutely.
give me the pitch on like why you, right? We talked a little bit about what people might want to evaluate when they're thinking about, hey, which one of these judges do I vote for? It's not as easy as just going down the partisan line. Like, tell us specifically about Lance, like why Lance for this judge position, and what's like some of your relevant background on like people could connect to you and be like, oh yeah, it's not just because his name almost is spelled Henderson. Why would they vote for Lance Hendron?
You know, the one thing again is that community engagement and the access to justice. Kind of circling back, again, being out here for 35 years, having seen a lot of the growth here in our community, the changes in our community, just being actively involved. Small business owner with my law practice now that I've ran for over 18 years.
It's your business?
It's my business.
So what are you going to do when you win? I hope you have a partner you can hand off these cases to.
There are a lot of colleagues. And see, that's the thing is when we say like a solo practitioner, there's a huge network of attorneys as well. And we try to assist each other with, strategizing. And I have a lot of great colleagues that I certainly would talk about with if I'm blessed to be elected to the position, that I would wind down my practice and making sure all of my clients are taken care of, because that's obviously the most important thing for me now. And even with dealing with this election, my clients are extremely important to me. But kind of going back with being the small business owner for roughly 18 years and primarily doing the criminal defense work. But I do have, some limited experience. I had the opportunity through undergrad to do an internship at the major violators at the district attorney's office for about 2 months or so during summer, which gave me kind of that initial experience into becoming an attorney and practicing in criminal law. And then having the ability, I've not only done criminal defense, but I'm very actively engaged with the Legal Aid Center of Southern Nevada. That's run by Barbara Buckley. And through that outfit, it's the access of justice, trying to help out individuals who may otherwise not have had the opportunities to have legal representation. I've handled all kind of cases through legal aid, and some of those include the landlord-tenant eviction issues. I try to participate in what's called the Ask a Lawyer, and if you go on their website and you have certain questions that you may be intimidated for just calling an attorney up, you can actually reserve like a 15-minute spot. And these attorneys who sign up to do Ask a Lawyer will call you and try to help you at least get an overview of that issue you're dealing with. So I've been heavily involved with Legal Aid Center. I'm an active member of their pro bono council. So I've got that experience both dealing with the evictions, and I've also handled these kind of small claims, smaller civil suits, if you will, through my practice as well. So I think I bring collectively everything that's been presented to the table. I've acted as down in Las Vegas Justice Court, a small claims judge. I was appointed and did that for several years. For me, having that community experience, having been involved with the Henderson Police Citizens Academy, I've done ride-alongs with Henderson Police. I've acted as doing their skits, role-playing for their recruits, which are interesting because a lot of my experience on that is watching like the body cams of what they've gone through.
Right.
So acting like that a-hole, that ass, if you will, dealing with that, it's, I've had the ability of doing that. And so I just think I bring a lot respectfully to the table that I think could benefit our community at large. And it's something that I humbly would take great pride in.
Perfect. Well, now I'm going to really put you on the spot and ask you what's your favorite spot in Henderson, either to eat or relax. Like, what's your favorite restaurant in town that you find yourself going to over and over again? Even though you say you're going to find something new. I do this with my family all the time. It's like, let's try something new. No, let's go to one of our 3 standbys. So just for the Henderson residents, what's your go-to restaurant or coffee shop?
Well, my go-to restaurant, see, my wife gets frustrated with me because I just have that husband dad mentality of when she sends me a message, hey, what do you want to do for dinner? I say, let's get Anthony's Pizza. Let's just get cheese pizza. And she's like, You said that last week. You said that the week before.
Men are such simple. It's like, I'm the same way. I've been getting the same order at Subway for like 38 years. And my wife's like, you don't want to try anything else? There's like a lot of stuff here. I'm like, why would you change if the Subway Club is the best sandwich on the menu? She's like, you have no clue if it's the best Subway on the menu because you've never tried anything else. I'm like,
Right.
"Oh, works for me." All right. So Anthony's Pizza.
That's one. I go
If your wife was picking, where would she make you take her?
probably somewhere at the district.
Okay.
We usually go there, and I mean, like King's Fish House is usually a prime spot for us to go. I also like Toro Sushi.
Yeah.
That's a
really
big
good.
one, and I love sushi. I think the Toro tuna sushi itself is I'm a big fan of. So that's a spot I think if nearby our house that if I let her know, just kind of a short date night with our 15-year-old daughter and 8-year-old daughter at home nearby, we'll go sit down there and check it out.
And what's a business? I always ask this and it stumps people. What's a business or a service that Henderson is missing? I will tell you what mine is while you ponder on this. We need a good non-franchise, like amazing bagel shop because I love like fresh bagels and Einstein's. It's okay, but it just doesn't like hit the spot for me. So if some entrepreneur wants to open a great bagel shop on Water Street, I'll be there every morning for like bagel and eggs and avocado and I don't know, something. But is there a business or a service that Henderson's missing that you really wish we had or that we could, clone a location from the greater Vegas area?
I know there was a period in time when it was on the border, and unfortunately, the location on that border no longer exists. But a frequent spot that I go to, it's just on the other side of town for me, is Payman's Restaurant and Hookah Lounge.
Oh, okay.
So I really like Payman's, the Mediterranean food, and then hanging out. I've got some friends that I see every time I head down there when I get a chance over in the Hookah Lounge as well.
There you go. Okay. So another thing to bring to Water Street.
If there was an opportunity there, I mean, and Payman has been a longtime friend. I mean, when his original shop opened on Maryland Parkway, I think I was 8 or 9 years old meeting him then, and the friendship through my parents and him have been everlasting.
That's awesome. Anything I forgot to ask you about the law, about this position, about being a judge, anything that you want to say to the residents of Henderson?
I would humbly and respectfully appreciate support of our community. They can reach out. We'll provide all the information for contact. They can text me on my cell at 702-483-8181 or send me an email.
Oh, you are serious about connecting with the community.
Absolutely. And my email is lance@lance4judge.com. And if there are things they want to discuss, I want to make sure that I'm able to talk with them, introduce myself. Obviously, just, these broad, specific, like legal questions or how do you handle this or that. Again, understanding that as a judge, you can't just make like a certain statement how you would do this or that. It becomes extremely difficult, but just wanting them to know that I'm out there if there are any kind of community service projects or things that I could be involved with. I love hearing about them. And just, it's one of those things where I just really appreciate even being able to get into this position of having a campaign and running for Henderson Justice Court Department 3. I just really blessed and humbled that we have these opportunities. And I want to make sure others have opportunities as well. So, again, looking at it, educate yourself on the names of who's going to be on the ballot with faces, and Hendron for Henderson, like we've talked about. Hendron for Henderson.
That's the way to end the podcast, man. Thanks for being on.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate you, brother.
That's awesome. Hey, it's Scott Groves with the Henderson HQ podcast. I hope you got something out of that episode. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the podcast. It really helps the show grow. And by the way, if you are a business owner or you know a business owner who has an interesting product, service, or just an interesting backstory, please get in touch with us. Email us at thehendersonhq@gmail.com. We would love to interview you because that's what this show is all about. It's about building community, supporting local, individually owned businesses, and just making Henderson a great place to live. And don't forget, go to hendersonhq.com and make sure you sign up for our newsletter. We send out a once-a-week newsletter, no spam, about the most interesting local businesses, hotspots, restaurants, community events. Thanks for watching the show. Really appreciate you.